I'm here today to talk about the glorious institution called the family, and here's mine. Hopefully, that's not mine, I'm pushing the button. There we go, there's my family. So I had 4 girls in very close succession, and then they're all in college now, and then 12 years later, we had a little boy. And people always ask if our little guy was an accident, but it depends on how you ask. I say it was a huge surprise. My husband says it was on purpose. So anyway, all heck broke loose in the neighborhood when I turned up pregnant at age 42. The shock and the "I'm so glad it's me" comments started rolling in. But as it turns out, I'm glad it was me. And I was involved in what was called a geriatric pregnancy. But it was worth it. It was worth it 1,000 times over, because look at that picture. That's my husband and my little guy who's now 6. About 4 years after my son was born, he and I were at the top of a water slide together. And we were about to go down. He was about to get on my lap. And he looked up at me, and out of the blue he said, "Mom, you're my favorite girl in the whole world. I love you more than anyone else." You can't buy that kind of love. That kind of love does not grow on trees. It grows in families. It grows best in families. And I submit that that's the very purpose of family creation, is to create that kind of love. And we all benefit from it. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says the family is entitled to protection by society and the state. This is because we all benefit from that kind of love. And it's that kind of love that holds society together. It's been observed that, quote, "the passionate determination of parents to protect and prefer their own children is almost universally displayed by parents across the globe." But is this wrong? Is it selfish to love your own kids? Some people think so, and as the doctrine of collectivism spreads, opposition to family love is growing. One academic said that the tendency to prefer one's children is, quote, "a moral vice." Another one said the wish to be biologically related to your children, like the wish to associate with one's own racial group, can have harmful effects. This way of thinking essentially villainizes family love. But loving and helping your own family is not selfish. It's taking responsibility for what is yours. And when everyone does this, essentially everyone in society is cared for. It's when families fail to care for their own members that society begins to break down. After the birth of our first baby, my husband went to the store to buy a few things we needed, and he returned home with the items plus a tiny dress covered with these little bows, and he had a huge smile on his face. And it gave him joy to provide something good for his new daughter. This is not evil. Having just become a father, he now understood what it was like and to love his own child, and he understood every other father a little bit better. Society in its entirety is built on this kind of love. And just for you, I went to the ad. I thought, I bet I can find that little dress, and I did. And there's the dress he bought, and this is our daughter all grown up now that he had bought the dress for. And that to me just sums up the generational power of family love. A family is designed to give each new human being their own cheering section, their own personal safety net, and their own unique place of belonging in the world. Families are the havens where God drops his most precious cargo. The title of my presentation today and the title of my book is The Invincible Family: Why the Global Campaign to Crush Motherhood and Fatherhood Can't Win. Almost 10 years ago, I joined an organization working to protect the family at the United Nations, and that's where my eyes were opened. Is there a global campaign to crush the family? Yes. I've seen it at the United Nations, and we see it everywhere, especially served up in the schools across the nation. I'm going to briefly address 3 movements that I've seen brewing at the global level. My hope in highlighting them is that we'll better understand where they're coming from and then be able to fight them better. First is the Children's Sexual Rights Campaign. It's anchored at the United Nations, supported by, no surprise, International Planned Parenthood Federation, and pushed through comprehensive sexuality education programs in schools across the world. It's highly funded and very well organized. Here are a few quotes from IPPF's Exclaim document for youth. Quote, "Sexuality and sexual pleasure are important parts of being human for everyone, no matter what age, no matter if you're married or not, and no matter if you want to have children or not. Any limitation on sexual rights must be non-discriminatory, including on the grounds of age. Governments and leaders have a duty to respect, protect, and fulfill all sexual rights for everyone. Similarly, UNESCO, a UN agency, has a document called the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education. It says, young people want and need sexuality and health information as early and as comprehensively as possible. Children should have agency in their own sexual practices and relationships. CSE, or Comprehensive Sexuality Education, can, quote, help children form respectful and healthy relationships with sexual partners, plural. There's a huge push for what's called Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, or SRHR, at the United Nations. SRHR includes these elements. Sex is a right. Sexual activity and pleasure are a right. CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education, is a right for all children. Abortion is a right. Gender is fluid, and biological sex is meaningless and changeable. These are all global movements. I want to show you two short clips. Actually, in the interest of time, I'll just show you one. In the first one, I'm going to skip an official for UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund. The thing that he was speaking in was called Reclaiming Gender Justice. And in it, he says that the whole focus of all UN programs working together is to focus on the 12-year-old girl. Think about that. Think about why that is. 12 years old and the girl. I'll have to skip it, but sexual and reproductive health and rights are God-given rights. So that list of things that I just had up there, he says those are all God-given rights. And this is representing the UN, their position. And then, interestingly enough, yeah. Interestingly enough, the very next month, this article came out. Planned Parenthood announces new members of clergy advisory board who support reproductive rights as a matter of faith. I just want to show you, this is one example of people think the UN is so far away and doesn't affect us, but it does. And this is one very clear example of that. Okay, it's important to note the addition of transgender ideology to sexual and reproductive health and rights in recent years, and its particular threats to the family. Transgender ideology undercuts the family in three major ways. It frames the parents as enemies to their own children. It upends parental rights, as we're increasingly seeing, especially now in California, and legally unhinges biological relationships through desexing language. Make no mistake, legal developments surrounding transgenderism are setting the stage for the legal marginalization of mothers, fathers, and families by force of law. We don't have time to address this issue in length, but I address it in many of my articles, which you'll find at invinciblefamily.com and also in my book. Second, social and emotional learning, or SEL. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, is a primary force behind the SEL movement worldwide. A major way UNESCO advocates through SEL is through its Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development. That's a big, long name, and they put Gandhi's name in it to make us like it, but we should not like it. I'll show you a couple. The Gandhi Institute produces an online publication called The Blue Dot, and in it they feature articles from SEL experts around the globe. I highly recommend you go to their website there and look around. It's extremely creepy, but it makes it clear that the push for SEL is global. It is coming from the United Nations, as well as many other tentacles. The title of a feature article, co-written by a specialist from the Gandhi Institute, reveals why UNESCO is determined to get SEL into schools across America and through the world. The title is this: SEL for SDGs, Why Social and Emotional Learning is Necessary to Achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs, of course, are the set of objectives the UN has set for the world that are being pushed through socialistic, collectivist, and increasingly coercive means. The article then explains how SEL will help children get over their feelings of dissonance towards these goals or their resistance to them. Other articles explain that SEL helps schools, quote, move beyond just the academic purposes of education and raise up, quote, they say that their goal is to raise up the next generation of global citizens, and how? They say by instilling, quote, pluralistic thinking in children. Nothing about any of that makes me happy at all. In fact, it's very, very alarming, as is the third movement, filtering down from global level into our schools, the community schools or whole school, whole child movement. For context, let me quote one early Russian communist who said, "We must rescue children from the harmful influence of the family. We must nationalize them. From the earliest days of their little lives, they must find themselves under the beneficent influence of communist schools. To oblige the mother to give her child to the Soviet state, that is our task. Does that sound familiar? He explains that this would be done by providing full-service care centers where children would be, quote, supervised by trained pediatrical and medical personnel for essentially the first 2 decades of their lives. So you'll notice this is eerily similar to the aim of the community schools movement today. The Centers for Disease Control actively promotes community schools. The National Education Association is also an architect and proponent of the community schools movement. Their website says, community schools provide free healthy meals, healthcare, tutoring, mental health counseling, and other tailored services before, during, and after school. It says the community schools model should be replicated in every community, no matter how big or small, and that it's time that every child gets the community school they deserve. I'm not going to go into the details of this graphic here. You'll find it in my book, but it shows how the ideologies from the UN trickle down to your child's classroom. One indication that I've circled there, one major player is the Global Partnership for Education. The GPE seeks to establish schools that are educational facilities, nutrition facilities, and medical facilities all under one roof, and they're currently focused on funding such schools in developing nations. Notice that in this infographic, the GPE's vision for full-service schools cites specifically comprehensive sexuality education as a necessary component, which goes back to the children's sexual rights movement where I started. The push for community schools is enormous, well-funded, and will barrel forward unless parents and policymakers stop it. I'll add a note here that at a UN education meeting just this week, a representative urged policymakers to begin CSE at age 2 to, quote, expand children's ideas of what's possible for them beyond the binary. Furthermore, recently, the UN Women recently mobilized $40 billion to push its gender expansive agenda forward worldwide. The answer to saving the world is the family. There's no other explanation other than that. Let's move forward to the end, to the next video, please, so I can finish up. I want to share just a snippet that kind of sums all this up from a recent interview that I had. You know, there's so much talk about world powers. I mean, you know, we have China rattling its sabers over here, and Russia storming in over there, and North Korea threatening or whatever, but the real world power, the original world power, is mothers. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And if we have, you know, these reformers wanting to march in and start sexual rights activists wanting to march in and take control of our kids, we're not having that. The mothers of the world are 2 billion strong. And we fight hard. And when it comes to our kids, we don't give up ever. Right. We don't give up ever. The light of and the love of families is bright in us today, and it will last forever. The family is God's secret weapon, and it is invincible. The family is written into our very anatomy by the hand of God, and He does not intend to fail. May God bless our nation that is built on the backs of beautiful, powerful families. Thank you.